Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sea had always sung to Mira, but she was used to ignoring it. She lived a life tethered to the land, her days filled with the same rhythm as her father's, a fisherman who had spent his entire life mending nets, repairing boats, and offering silent prayers to the sea that gave them life. Mira was the daughter of the ocean, but she had never thought she could belong to it. Not like the stories told by the elders, tales of ancient powers and sea kings that stirred the waves at their command. No, she was just a girl, a fisherman's daughter, destined for the quiet life of the village. Her feet touched the damp sand as the tide rolled in, the frothy water licking at her toes. As always, it calmed her. The sea and sky stretched endlessly before her, a vast expanse of blue that she could never fully grasp. Sometimes, in moments like this, when the wind carried the scent of salt, she thought she could hear something beneath the surface, like the whispers of long-forgotten secrets. But it was easier to dismiss it, to shake off the thought and carry on with her mundane life. After all, the sea was just the sea, beautiful, powerful, but far removed from her simple existence. That was until Sapphira came to the village. The old woman was a stranger, her appearance sudden and her purpose unknown. She had arrived with the tides, as some whispered, emerging from the sea as if summoned by its depths. Her eyes were like the ocean itself, a swirling mix of blue and green, and her presence sent murmurs through the village. Some thought she was a witch, others a wanderer with knowledge of the distant lands across the horizon. Mira didn't know what to think when the old woman approached her, standing alone by the water's edge at dusk. "You've heard the call, haven't you?" Sapphira's voice was like the sound of waves crashing against rocks, steady, ancient. Mira had looked at her, confusion tightening her brow. "What call?" "The sea calls to you, child. You are its chosen successor." The words had hit her like a tidal wave, pulling her under into a current of confusion and disbelief. Successor? The old woman spoke of ancient powers and destinies as if it were the most natural thing in the world. But Myra's world had always been small, confined to the edges of the village, with the furthest horizon being wherever her father's fishing boat could take her. "I think you have the wrong person," Mira had said, shaking her head and turning back to the sea. "I'm just a girl. There's nothing special about me." But Sapphira didn't relent. "You are the next master of tides, Mira. The sea has chosen you." Mira had wanted to laugh, to dismiss the old woman as a rambling fool, but the seriousness in Sapphira's eyes made her pause. There was something unsettling about the way the woman spoke, as if she truly believed it. Mira felt her pulse quicken, a strange tug in her chest that mirrored the ebb and flow of the waves. She had always felt something when she was near the water, but she had never allowed herself to question it. What was this old woman really saying? "I don't want this," Mira whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I just want to live my life." Sapphira nodded, as if she expected that answer. "Many don't want the destiny they're given, but the sea doesn't make mistakes. It chose you because it needs you. The ocean is restless. Without a master of tides, it will become dangerous, unpredictable." The weight of those words pressed down on Mira, a burden she hadn't asked for but now could not ignore. She felt the pull again, that deep connection to the ocean, but it terrified her. The thought of leaving her village, her father, her normal life, she wasn't ready for that. She wasn't ready to be the master of tides. "I can't," she said, her voice trembling. Sapphira watched her for a long moment, her gaze softening. "You have time, child. But not forever. The sea waits for no one." For the next few days, Mira tried to push the encounter with Sapphira out of her mind, but the sea wouldn't let her. Every time she stood near the shore, the waves seemed to speak to her, a faint hum beneath the surface that grew louder and more insistent. She felt the power stirring inside her, an energy that she couldn't control. The tide seemed to rise and fall with her emotions, and the more she resisted, the stronger the pull became. It was on the third day after Sapphira's visit that a storm hit the village. It came without warning, violent winds, blackened skies, and waves that crashed over the docks, tearing boats from their moorings. The villagers scrambled to protect what they could, but the storm was relentless, as if the sea itself was angry. Mira stood on the beach, her heart racing as she watched the chaos unfold. She felt the storm inside her, a mirror to the one raging outside, and she knew then that this was her doing. The sea was out of balance, and it was calling her to fix it. Sapphira appeared again, standing at the edge of the village, her cloak billowing in the wind. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. This was the moment. Mira had to make a choice. With a deep breath, Mira ran to her. "Take me to the sea," she said, her voice barely audible above the roar of the storm. Sapphira nodded, and without a word, they set off towards the water. The journey into the ocean was like nothing Mira had ever imagined. As they plunged beneath the surface, the world above faded away, replaced by an eerie silence and the cool embrace of the deep. Sapphira led her through a labyrinth of underwater caverns, each one more breathtaking than the last. Strange, luminous creatures darted through the water, casting an ethereal glow on the ancient ruins that lay scattered across the ocean floor. Mira marveled at the beauty and mystery of this hidden world, but the deeper they went, the more she felt the weight of her destiny pressing down on her. At last, they arrived at a massive, sunken temple, its walls covered in intricate carvings that told the story of the masters of tides. It was here, in the heart of the ocean, that the master of tides resided. Mira could feel the power emanating from the temple, a force so ancient and vast that it made her feel small in comparison. Inside the temple, the water was still, as if time itself had stopped. At the center of the chamber stood a towering figure, its body made entirely of shimmering water and light. This was the master of tides, the being that had ruled the oceans for centuries. It turned to face Mira, and for a moment, she felt a deep connection to it, as if she had known this being all her life. "Why me?" Mira whispered, her voice trembling. "Why was I chosen?" The master of tides didn't speak, but its thoughts filled her mind, a voice as ancient as the sea itself. "You are the sea's daughter, born of its depths. Your mother was once chosen, but she turned away from her duty to raise you. Now, the sea has called you to finish what she could not." Mira's heart ached at the mention of her mother. She had always wondered about her, about the woman who had left when she was just a child. Now, she understood. Her mother had been the master of tides, but she had given up that power to live a normal life, to raise her daughter. And now, the burden had passed to Mira. "I don't want this," Mira said, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be the master of tides." The master of tides gazed at her with understanding. "Many do not choose their destiny, but the sea needs a protector. Without you, the ocean will rage uncontrollably, and countless lives will be lost." Mira felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't want this responsibility, but she couldn't deny the truth. The sea was out of balance, and she was the only one who could restore it. But the thought of leaving her village, her family, everything she had ever known, it was too much. "Is there no other way?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The master of tides was silent for a long moment before finally answering. "There is a way, but it will not be easy. You must prove yourself worthy by facing the trial of the sea. Mira didn't know what to expect when she agreed to face the trial, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. The ocean itself seemed to come alive as she descended deeper into the heart of the sea. The water grew colder, darker, and more oppressive, and she felt the weight of the entire ocean pressing down on her. She was alone now, separated from Sapphira, separated from everything she had ever known. The trial began with a vision, her father, standing on the shore, calling her name. She could see the worry etched on his face, the fear in his eyes. He had always been protective of her, always afraid that the sea would one day take her away. And now, she was about to fulfill his worst fear. Mira wanted to run to him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but the ocean wouldn't let her. The current pulled her away, deeper and deeper into the darkness. Next came the creatures, terrifying beasts that lurked in the shadows of the deep. Massive, glowing-eyed predators with razor-sharp teeth circled her, their presence a constant reminder of the danger she faced. Mira fought to keep her fear at bay, but it gnawed at her, threatening to overwhelm her. She had never been a fighter, never been one to face danger head-on. But now, she had no choice. As the trial continued, Mira was forced to confront her deepest insecurities, the fear that she wasn't strong enough, that she wasn't worthy of this power. She saw visions of her mother, abandoning her duty to raise her, and she wondered if she would do the same. Would she choose the easy path, or would she rise to the challenge? In the final moments of the trial, Mira found herself standing at the center of a massive whirlpool, the water swirling around her with terrifying speed. The sea roared, demanding her submission, demanding that she prove herself. Mira felt the pull of the water, the overwhelming force that threatened to drag her under. But instead of fighting it, she let go. She surrendered to the ocean, not out of fear, but out of acceptance. She was the sea's daughter, and it was time to embrace her destiny. The moment she let go, the whirlpool stopped. The water calmed, and a sense of peace washed over her. Mira had passed the trial. She was the new master of tides. Mira returned to the surface, the weight of her new responsibility settling on her shoulders. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. She had chosen this path, and she was ready to accept it. The storm had passed, and the village was beginning to rebuild. Her father stood at the edge of the shore, watching the sea with a look of awe and respect. Mira walked towards him, her heart full of both love and sorrow. She would always be his daughter, but now, she was something more. "I'm sorry," she whispered. As she reached him, her father turned to her, his eyes filled with understanding. "You don't need to apologize. I always knew the sea would call you one day. I just didn't want to admit it." Mira smiled, tears welling in her eyes. She embraced him, feeling the warmth of his love and the strength it gave her. She wasn't alone in this. She had her family, her village, and the sea itself. As she turned back towards the ocean, Mira felt the power of the tides flowing through her. She was the master of tides now, and she would protect the ocean and all who depended on it. As Mira gazed out at the calm sea, the familiar sound of waves breaking against the shore filled her ears. The once tumultuous waters were now serene, their restlessness tamed, and she felt the pulse of the ocean within her, a steady rhythm that connected her to its every current and tide. The power of the master of tides surged through her veins, no longer foreign or overwhelming. It was a part of her now, natural, almost comforting. Yet the weight of her new role still pressed against her, a constant reminder of the responsibility she had accepted. Mira knew the village would not understand what had changed, not fully. To them, the storm had passed, a force of nature as unpredictable as it had always been. But Mira knew better. The ocean had been on the edge of losing itself, its balance disrupted by the absence of a master. She had prevented that disaster, yet there was no glory in it. No one would sing songs of her triumph. The village would continue as it always had, unaware of the forces that governed the tides. She walked away from the shore, feeling the cool sand beneath her feet, her gaze drifting toward the familiar sight of the fishing boats bobbing on the gentle waves. Her father's boat had survived the storm, though it had taken damage. The thought of him, of her family, brought a knot of emotion to her chest. She had returned, but she wasn't the same girl who had once stood on this beach, dreaming of a simple life by the sea. Mira. Her father's voice called out from the direction of the village. She turned to see him standing by the remnants of a broken dock, wiping his hands on a cloth. His face was lined with weariness, but his eyes brightened when they met hers. He waved her over, his rough hands beckoning her to come closer. Mira smiled, her heart swelling with the familiar warmth of home, even as the sea tugged at her, reminding her that her connection to it was eternal. She would always be bound to the ocean, but for now, she could be here, with him. She made her way toward him, noticing the damage left behind by the storm. Broken planks and torn sails littered the beach, and the smell of salt water mixed with the scent of drying wood. The villagers were already hard at work, repairing what they could, their faces marked by exhaustion but also determination. Life went on here, no matter how fierce the sea had been. As she reached her father, he gave her a tight, knowing smile, one that spoke of years of silent understanding between them. He didn't ask her where she had been or what she had done. He didn't need to. Storm didn't do too much damage, he said gruffly, his eyes scanning the wreckage. Could have been worse. It could have, she agreed, her voice soft but steady. She knew just how close they had come to losing everything. Without her intervention, the sea's fury could have consumed them all. Her father gave her a long look, the wind tousling his graying hair. He seemed to be searching for something in her face, as if trying to reconcile the daughter he had raised with the young woman standing before him now. Mira wondered what he saw. Did he sense the change in her? Did he feel the power of the tides that now coursed through her? You've always had a gift with the sea, he said finally, his voice low. Your mother did too. Myra's chest tightened at the mention of her mother. She had always been a mystery, a distant figure whose presence lingered in the stories her father told on rare occasions. Now, Mira understood why. Her mother had once been the master of tides, a role she had abandoned for the sake of family. Mira still didn't know if she resented her for that choice or if she pitied her. She had her reasons, her father added, almost as if reading her thoughts. But you'll do what's right. Mira nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe she could honor both her mother's legacy and her own path. But the truth was, she didn't know what the future held. The sea was vast, filled with mysteries she had only begun to understand. And now, she was its protector. Her father clapped her on the shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. Come on. We've got work to do. Mira followed him to the broken dock, where they set to work repairing the damage. As they worked, the sun began to sink lower on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village. The rhythm of the labor, the hammering of nails, the creaking of wood, was soothing in its simplicity. For a brief moment, Mira allowed herself to forget about the ocean's pull, to lose herself in the familiar routine of village life. But as dusk fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Mira felt it again, that deep, insistent call from the sea. It was gentle now, a quiet hum in the back of her mind, but it was always there. She couldn't ignore it. She was no longer just Mira, the fisherman's daughter. She was the master of tides, and the ocean would always be a part of her. That night, after the village had settled into the quiet of sleep, Mira found herself standing on the shore once more, the waves lapping at her feet. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver path across the water. She could feel the energy of the ocean swirling beneath the surface, its vastness both exhilarating and humbling. She reached out with her mind, feeling the currents, the tides, the endless movement of the sea. It was as if the ocean itself was breathing, alive and aware. Mira closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her, a sense of peace and power settling within her. She was ready now. Ready to embrace her role fully, not as a burden, but as a gift. As the wind whispered through her hair, Mira made a silent promise to the sea. She would protect it, guide it, and nurture it, just as it had always done for her village. But she would also remain connected to her family, her people. She would walk the line between land and sea, a bridge between two worlds. With that, she turned away from the ocean and walked back toward the village, her heart lightened by the knowledge that she could be both, Mira, the fisherman's daughter, and the master of tides.